My next guest is Congressman Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, who is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, a frequent guest of ours at the Hill, and we're very grateful for that. He's also served in the Air Force in both Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. Congressman Kinzinger, it's great to see you again. You know and I admire greatly your worry about the health of democracy in this country, which is one topic we go up. The other concern is that the health of national security in this country, and how do we make smart, correct bets in the future about our security and defense. And you are now, on all sides of this. You fought for the country. You're now fighting for the country in Congress. What are parts of your dashboard that you'd like to share with our audience today that you think really matter about our national security priorities?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And just so you know, I'm getting a little distorted audio from you. I can hear you, but if I have the same problem, let me know and we can reset it.
You sound great.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. So look, I think, and thanks for having me, one of the biggest concerns that I have is, as you mentioned, foreign policy is a passion of mine because I think, America has a special, unique role in this world that no other country can serve. And that is to be an example to millions of people that are really just desperate for a taste of what we have. And when I see democracy shudder like we've had, it's kind of like, for the pilots out there, right before you stall, you hit a buffet. And that was January 6th. It was like this warning that we're in a bad place. I think it not only hurts our moral authority, but democracies are not defined just by bad days, but how we come back from them. But beyond that, it's our foreign policy has now started to become partisan. You see things like Russia and China now kind of falling into partisan camps. You blame Russia more if you're this person or China more if you're that on that side of the aisle. And I think that disunity in our foreign policy, and particularly the disunity and mistrust at home, is really among my biggest fears in foreign policy, because I think that takes away our ability to have a real impact everywhere else.
I know this is an unfair question, but what do you think the Biden team could do to detoxify that environment and go back to those old days of Vandenberg and others that were able to reach across the aisle on national security? What are some of the things you would tell this administration, this would help when it comes to defense?
So I think a couple things, but first, just in how we talk about stuff, we get in this cycle. Frankly, honestly, both parties get in it, where if it's time for a little payback, we do payback. If it's time to, say, well, the other side does it this way, so we're going to match that, that happens. And that happens a lot when we talk about issues, when we talk about, of course, January 6th. My advice to the Biden administration on tone is basically keep doing what you're doing. I think they have brought down the rhetoric on foreign policy a lot. I think, the restoration of alliances is going to be important to show people in the United States the importance of an alliance. NATO, we're very important for NATO. NATO is also really important for us. And I think recognizing the challenges in a fair way. So, seeing that China is going to be a really kind of a generational competition in the United States. Nobody seeks war with China, but we have to maintain our interests. Also confronting places like Russia and, of course, terrorism. I think really when it comes to just restoring that, its tone, and then congressional leadership, particularly because the Democrats are in the majority now, especially on the Foreign Policy Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, is don't just bring up kind of issue du jour that are out there playing in a campaign, but just really address real issues of national security. And I think we can keep politics from, or start to have politics come out of, infecting those conversations that shouldn't be infected by politics.
One of the topics I've been long interested in is Afghanistan. I've been writing about it for 20 years. And it seems for the last 11 years, the concerns about how to leave responsibly have been mentioned every year. They're coming up again, which means don't leave. And I'm just interested. You've been in that fray in Iraq, and Afghanistan. I guess the question is, when does the political guidance to the Pentagon and to the White House, need to shift so that you can leave responsibly, but we leave?
Well, it's a good question. And I think there's a couple of things we have to table set on Afghanistan a little bit. Even President Trump at one point kind of slipped up and said, it's not really a war, it's kind of a peacekeeping mission right now. And you recognize the fact that the Afghan people are the ones bearing the brunt of the war. There's still a significant amount of them being killed every day. But they want the United States there to help stiffen their spine with NATO. What we're doing is basically having combat power where we need to against terrorists, strengthening our Afghan allies, and hoping that we can get to a point where, we can leave, and soon. The issue is, though, I think we have to look at what is the alternative. If we pull out and NATO pulls out, I think it's pretty obvious that it's going to be tough for the Afghan government to stay. And what does that take us to? Anytime you have ungoverned territory where terrorist organizations can plan and train and recruit is dangerous. And we know we're going to end back there anyway. You look at, frankly, the mineral wealth of Afghanistan, and you know how much China wants that to strengthen their grip on the world. So I think for us, it's not a matter of, talking about endless wars. It's a matter of recognizing that when we have peacekeeping operations, sometimes we have to stay there for a long time. We still have people in Kosovo and other places, but we want to leave, but we also can't do it prematurely. And so I think as Americans, we have a question. Do we put another 100,000 troops in and defeat the Taliban? I don't think there's any political will to do that. So in the meantime, what we're showing, like what we did in Iraq, a smaller American footprint to strengthen the bigger footprint of those in the area is successful. But I think we have to get out of this kind of constant thing of we just need to leave. And frankly, I think the administration needs to go back to explaining why we're there and what happens if we do leave.
Thank you for that. Adam, what's your dashboard on China? I know you were part of the Republican House task force on China, and the administration, Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan met their Chinese counterparts over in Alaska recently, had some tough talk. But I guess, if I were a member of Congress and I wanted to, confront China, the first thing I would do is say, let's double the National Science Foundation budget. Let's invest in ourselves. I don't often hear those kinds of things. It's more about posturing about China. But I'd love to get your insights into what you think would be credible measures to kind of deal with the China challenge that our audience ought to hear.
So I think you're absolutely right. When we see things like AI, quantum computing, the stuff that, scares us because we think it's going to lead to the Terminator trilogy. Well, it may, but it's quite honestly, the Chinese and the Russians, for instance, are chasing this. So I think the investment in things like that is really important, recognizing the role that diplomacy plays. Looking at what China has done with the Belt and Road Initiative, and I just saw indications that this administration was looking at, or maybe President Biden mentioned the idea of having a competing Belt and Road Initiative. I think that's brilliant, quite honestly. Of course, devil's in the details, but I think looking at this as a battle around the world, not of necessarily tanks and ships and airplanes, we hope, but also a battle of people choosing freedom over communism backed up by a free market, a crony free market. And I think also things like, exposing the amount of debt that China actually has out there in a lot of their debt diplomacy traps. How leveraged is China? Exposing things like the fact that the Chinese Communist Party spends more money on internal security than they do on external security. What are they afraid of? So I think it's confronting ideologically. It's confronting ideologically with diplomacy around the world. And of course, still having that posture militarily so that we are very clear that there will be consequences to crossing lines. It's the problem with being a superpower is you have to be good in all areas. If you're a regional power, a rising power like China, you just have to be able to, for instance, be really good at pushing American troops out of your near region and hoping you crack their will. And I think making it clear that they won't crack the American will actually would make war far less likely between us.
You mentioned ships and planes and something else in there, satellites, whatever. We make these things. We make them. And was on a call recently with one of your colleagues, Elaine Luria of Virginia. Incredible, where we were talking about Navy. She was in the Navy, but her sophisticated understanding of how, the dimensions of that defense industrial base allows us to make some of the most sophisticated weaponry and planes and whatnot in the world. And I don't know if there's actually a very good public understanding of how vital that capacity is for manufacturing, for technology development. And I worry a little bit, to be candid, that not knowing creates an ambivalence about it. And I'm just wondering whether it comes to these platforms, and I want to acknowledge we do have a sponsor of this, but that's not why I'm asking this question, but whether or not we need to somehow ratchet up to remind people that the global supply chain, that technology, these issues that go into this, these sophisticated weapon systems, radar, space, et cetera, really matter for this country.
I think it's a great point. And I think, understanding that, I represent Rockford, Illinois. It's the 5th largest aerospace manufacturing hub in the country. They have pieces of everything in aerospace, and how America has basically re-excelled in the aerospace area, and the importance not just to jobs. Jobs are extremely important, of course, and making sure we have that for people. But the fact that, look, if we ever, God forbid, enter a situation with like World War III, who's in the best position to deal with that? Why is it important to have, strong space-based asset? And I think part of that, talking about that supply chain as well, is talking in more depth about the defense budget. It's really easy to look at the defense budget and say, well, America spends more than the next dozen countries combined. What they don't take into account a lot of the times in that discussion is the fact that a significant portion of the defense budget goes to pay and benefits of the military. Now, we always in Congress love to raise the military's pay. That's a good thing. And then we cap the defense budget. And all we're doing in that process is taking away from what we can invest in that next generation of technology. Because yes, it's politically easy to say, I want to give a 4% pay raise to the troops. It's also politically easy to say we spend too much on defense and we need to cut it. And then we wonder why we have accidents around the world or people aren't getting the training. And I think that is really essential as we go forward and we talk about smart defense budgeting to make sure that we're very clear about that.
Well, Representative Adam Kinzinger, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee from Illinois, I will say, very politely and respectfully of our former president, I used to read his tweets every day because it was part of our job and we needed to be aware of what he was doing. I look into your tweets because I really want to. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. Good talking to you. Hey, if you're out there too, Adam Kinzinger, follow it. We have fun.
Absolutely.